I only said 2 words. It's mine. The sound cracked through the hall like a gunshot, echoing off chandeliers and glass. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me, the air holding its breath. One phone light blinked red, recording everything, the moment my life veered off its axis. Before I tell you what happened next, hit subscribe, like, and share this story. Because some truths don't stay buried, and when this one breaks open, you'll want to see every piece fall. When I opened my eyes again, there were bandages wrapped around my head, and the video had already hit 5 million views. By then it was too late for anyone else to tell my story. My name was Riley Vale. I stood near the service entrance of the Marion Grand Ballroom, a place I always preferred. It gave me an escape route and a full view of the social ecosystem I'd never truly belonged to. The air outside in High Vale, that mountain town people romanticized for its crisp purity, was thin and clean. But in here, under the chandeliers and velvet drapes, it was heavy. The scent of imported lilies and champagne mingled with something more human. Perfume, sweat, ambition. I held a glass of water. The ice had melted hours ago. My reflection trembled in the liquid, fractured by the crystal glass. I wasn't supposed to be part of the show. The Marion Grand Ballroom shimmered like a dream built on deceit. Its chandeliers, each worth more than the average car, threw broken shards of light across the marble floor, scattering brilliance and shadow in equal measure. As a designer, I could admire the craftsmanship. But beneath the gold leaf and crystal, I could smell it, the rot of pretense. Beauty bought and polished to disguise decay. At the center of it all stood Lena Vale, my younger sister. She was luminous in that way that demands worship. Her laughter rippled like music, rehearsed yet effortless, and people moved toward her as if pulled by gravity. The silk of her gown clung to her like it had chosen her body as its altar. She was the sun of every room. I had long ago made peace with being her shadow. My father, Thomas Vale, stood near the towering wedding cake, champagne in hand. He tapped his glass with a silver spoon, summoning silence from 200 voices. "Welcome everyone," he boomed, his grin all warmth and deception. "To celebrate the union of my daughter Lena and her wonderful husband Daniel, my wife and I wanted to give them something truly extraordinary." I felt it before I heard it. A tightening in the air. The prelude to a storm. My father's words flowed smooth as honey, practiced and poisonous. "We are overjoyed," he said, raising his glass, "to present our gift to the happy couple, a foundation for their life together." Every guest leaned in, smiling, waiting for the grand gesture. I stood frozen, my glass trembling slightly in my hand, though the air itself seemed to hold still. Thomas's grin widened, every tooth gleaming in the chandelier light. "We are thrilled to announce our gift, the house on Maple Hollow Lane." The words punched the breath out of me. I didn't gasp. I didn't even move. I simply stopped existing for a heartbeat. The room erupted into applause, laughter, cheers. Phones rose like a field of mechanical flowers, capturing the spectacle. My house. The one I'd found as a ruin, a skeleton of wood and stone. The one I'd rebuilt with my own hands. Every beam, every floorboard bore my fingerprints. Now it was being given away like a trinket. "Oh, how generous," someone whispered beside me. Another guest clapped my shoulder. "Riley, you're incredible." I stared at my father. His smile didn't falter. And in that moment I understood. This was never about generosity. It was about control. The applause swelled, a wave of sound so loud it blurred into a single roar. Faces turned toward me, smiling, admiring, clueless. I could feel the weight of their admiration pressing down like chains. They believed I'd known. They believed I'd agreed. Across the room, Lena's perfect face crumpled into the most artful surprise. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes glossy with staged tears. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, voice trembling just enough for the microphones nearby. "It's too much. Too much." I wanted to laugh. I backed against the wall, the cold marble steady against my spine, grounding me. My father basked in the attention, his pride radiating like heat from a furnace. The scent of bourbon drifted from him in invisible clouds. I watched my sister accept congratulations for something she hadn't earned, and I felt a wire deep inside me, one I had kept twisted tight for decades, finally snap. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I simply began to walk. My heels struck the marble with a sound that cut through the cheers like a metronome of defiance. Hic, hic. The crowd parted, uncertain, their applause faltering. My father's eyes met mine, confusion first, then warning. I didn't stop. By the time I reached the head table, silence had swallowed the room. 200 guests sat frozen, their smiles suspended midair. My mother's fingers clutched the stem of her glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. My father turned toward me, the showman's grin cracking at the edges. "Riley," he said, his voice low, controlled, meant only for me but carried easily in the hush. "Don't do this." I looked at him, then at Lena, still gleaming, still pretending, and finally at the phones, dozens of them, lenses glinting like eyes. "That's a lie," I said. Came out steady, clear. My voice didn't tremble. The stillness after was suffocating. My father blinked, stunned for half a second. Then his face changed, his charm evaporating, leaving only the man underneath. His voice dropped to a growl. "What did you just say to me?" "I said it's a lie," I repeated louder this time. "I never agreed to give them my house." The air fractured. A murmur rippled through the guests, disbelief mixing with discomfort. My mother's lips moved soundlessly. My sister's smile died. And my father, his hand clenched around his glass until it cracked. The crystal stems splintered in his hand, a sharp glitter of broken glass catching the light. A bead of blood welled along his palm, but he didn't flinch. He stepped toward me, slow, deliberate, the predator stripped of his disguise. "Enough," he hissed. "You're humiliating yourself. Sit down." "No," I said. The word was soft but absolute. He took another step, bourbon thick on his breath. "You will not embarrass this family." My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear. It was clarity. "You already did," I said. "When you tried to give away what isn't yours." His eyes went wide, an explosion of fury. Then he moved. It wasn't a slap. It wasn't even a push. It was a full-bodied shove, force and rage compressed into one violent motion. I felt my feet leave the floor. For an instant weightless. Then, impact. The marble wall behind me didn't yield. The sound that tore through the room was obscene, sharp, wet, final. My glass flew from my hand and shattered against the floor. A scream, high, piercing, broke the silence. The crowd surged forward, chairs scraping, voices blurring. And as I slid down the wall, I felt warmth spilling down the back of my neck, hot, thick red. Blood. The world tilted. The chandeliers above me swam in a haze of fractured light, each crystal turning into a prism of pain. My hand came up instinctively, and when I pulled it away, my fingertips glistened dark red under the ballroom's glare. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Another screamed my name. But all I could hear was the dull ringing in my ears, the echo of that crack that had split more than just bone. I looked up. My father was frozen in the middle of the room, his hand still outstretched, his expression suspended between horror and denial. My mother covered her mouth, her eyes darting not to me, but to the crowd, scanning faces, gauging judgment. Lena. My sister was crying, beautiful, perfect tears that sparkled as they fell. But she wasn't looking at me either. She was watching the cameras, terrified not by the blood, but by the red light blinking on every phone pointed in our direction. Then I saw him. A young man by the bar, still filming, unmoving. His phone was steady, and in the corner of his screen a small red icon glowed. Not recording. Streaming. The lie had gone live. The sound of sirens began as a ghostly hum beyond the ballroom walls. Distant, rising, inevitable. Someone knelt beside me, pressing a white napkin to the wound on my head. "You're bleeding," she whispered, voice trembling. Her perfume was sharp, floral, suffocating. Behind her shoulder, another phone lens gleamed, capturing the scene. My blood against the stone, my father's face twisted in disbelief. Everything that had always been hidden in our house, the shouting, the quiet cruelty, the polished lies, was now illuminated under chandeliers and camera flashes. I could feel the pressure of the napkin, the warmth pooling down my collar. My breath came slow, deliberate. I wasn't crying. I wasn't afraid. I was just done. For years I'd been the quiet one, the one who fixed things, patched what was broken. But some fractures weren't meant to be mended. They were meant to be seen. I turned my head. My father was shouting something, gesturing wildly. She slipped. I heard him yell. It was an accident. No one believed him. Not anymore. The sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights strobed through the high windows, painting the marble walls like veins pulsing with truth. The silence I'd lived inside had finally broken. The paramedics' voices were a blur of commands and motion. Stay still, don't move your head. Can you hear me? A flashlight cut through my vision. I nodded once. My pulse roared in my ears like surf against stone. They lifted me carefully, the cold strap of the gurney pressing against my back. The chandeliers receded above me, blurring into orbs of light. Through the haze I caught one last image. My father trying to stand tall as the officers questioned him, his once sure hands trembling. Outside, the mountain air struck like glass, sharp and clean after the suffocating perfume of the ballroom. I breathed it in, shaky but full. Inside the ambulance, the siren's cry rose and fell like a heartbeat. My hands were sticky with blood, the metallic tang filling the small space. I stared at them, those same hands that had rebuilt walls, floors and staircases, and realized they had just built something else. A boundary. My phone, tucked in my ruined purse, vibrated over and over. Notifications, dozens, hundreds, buzzed through the fabric. The clip was already everywhere. For the first time in my life, people were finally seeing what I had lived. And there was no going back. The hospital lights were merciless, white, humming, endless. They made everything too clear. The antiseptic smell stung my nose as a doctor stitched the wound at my scalp. 7 staples, he murmured, his tone neutral, his eyes soft. You're lucky. Lucky. I lay still on the narrow bed, the paper sheet crackling beneath me. Every pulse of my heart echoed in the wound at the back of my head. Outside the thin curtain I heard murmurs. Police, nurses, voices muffled and serious. When they left me alone, the silence pressed close. My dress was stiff with dried blood. I wanted to peel it off, burn it, scrub my skin until no trace of that room remained. My phone buzzed again, ceaseless, relentless. I finally looked. Notifications scrolled like rain. The video, was everywhere. It had a name now, the Vale Wedding Incident. 5 million views. 12 million. Then 20. Headlines screamed variations of the same story. Father assaults daughter during wedding toast. The world was watching my family implode in high definition. I set the phone down, my hands trembling, but not from fear. Because for the first time the truth wasn't hidden in whispers. It was undeniable. By morning I was a headline instead of a daughter. The nurse who came to check my vitals couldn't meet my eyes. When she finally did, there was recognition there. Something between awe and pity. My sister sent me the video, she said quietly, almost apologetic. It's everywhere. I nodded, unable to find words. When the police entered my room, they didn't need to ask much. The younger officer looked furious. The older one looked tired. We've taken your father into custody, the woman said, flipping through her notes. We have 34 videos including the live stream. The hotel's security footage corroborates everything. Ms. Vale, do you wish to press charges? I thought of his hand gripping my shoulder. The bourbon on his breath. The word selfish that he'd wielded like a blade my entire life. Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake. I want to press charges. The officer's pen stopped moving for a second. She nodded. Good. When they left, I sat up slowly, pain pulsing through my skull, and stared out the window. Snow had begun to fall over High Vale, soft flakes drifting through pale light. For the first time in years, the silence around me didn't feel like obedience. It felt like peace. At dawn, I walked out of the hospital with my head stapled and my heart strangely steady. The air was sharp, crystalline, and tasted like something new, like freedom wrapped in frost. A familiar truck waited by the curb. Jonas Reed leaned against it, hands in his coat pockets. He was the one person who had ever seen the worth in my work before anyone else did. His gray suit looked out of place on him. He wore calluses better than silk, but his eyes were kind and certain. He opened the door. Get in. Inside the cab, warmth and silence. No questions. Just the hum of the engine and the road sliding beneath us. Where are we going? I asked, voice hoarse. Home, he said simply. Then after a pause, I already called a lawyer. Her name's Marion Holt. She specializes in property and corporate abuse cases. You like her, she's ruthless. Jonas, I said softly. You didn't have to. Yes, he interrupted. I did. Outside, the mountains rose blue-gray against the winter sky, indifferent and eternal. I pressed my forehead against the window, feeling the staples pull gently at my skin. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the bruises and shock, a thought formed clear as glass. They can't take this from me again. Marion Holt's office was all sharp edges, chrome, glass, and quiet authority. She didn't waste time with sympathy. She studied the stack of documents Jonas slid across her desk. The deed, the tax receipts, the invoices for lumber, copper, tile. 3 years of my life reduced to paper. When she finally looked up, her expression was unreadable. "The house is yours," she said. "Legally airtight. What they tried to do wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft with a PR campaign." She turned to her computer, her fingers moving fast. "I'm filing a restraining order against your father, your mother, and your sister. They come within 500 feet of you or the property, they're in violation. The county recorder will be notified before noon." I stared at her. Just like that. She looked at me with something close to pity, but colder. Just like that. They've played social theater their whole lives. You've got the evidence, not the applause. An hour later, as I sat in the lobby, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from my mother. Her voice trembled with performative grief. "Riley, please. Don't do this. You're destroying us. He loves you. We can fix this. Family first." Marion appeared in the doorway. "Save that," she said. "Label it coercion attempt 1. I did. And I didn't cry. By the next morning, the story had mutated into wildfire. News anchors said my name like a headline, not a person. Riley Vale, the daughter who said no. Marion worked in silence beside me, issuing statements, drafting legal filings. Her precision was surgical. "We control the narrative," she said. "No tears. No apologies. Just facts." Her press release was 2 sentences long. "Ms. Riley Vale is recovering from injuries sustained during an assault at the Marion Grand Hotel. She is cooperating fully with the Highvale Police Department regarding the confirmed ownership of her residence at 12 Maple Hollow Lane." That was it. Clean, irrefutable, final. By 6 p.m. the dominoes began to fall. The local news replayed the footage of my father's outburst alongside a new segment. Vale Enterprises under investigation for moral conduct violations. Sponsors began re-evaluating partnerships. A bank froze his accounts. When Marion took the call from the hotel manager, her voice sharpened. "Yes, we'll accept the footage," she said. "Yes, all copies." She hung up and looked at me. "We now have the God's eye view. Overhead cameras, crystal clear audio. It's done, Riley. He can't rewrite this." Outside her office window, snow fell in soft spirals, silent and endless. For the first time, the silence felt like protection, not punishment. When we returned to the Marion Grand the next morning, it no longer glowed. Daylight stripped it bare, just steel, marble, and the faint sour smell of rotting flowers. The air was heavy with what had been said and could never be unsaid. A few guests lingered for the post-wedding brunch, huddled in uneasy clusters, sipping mimosas and pretending not to whisper. Their laughter was brittle, afraid. Marion walked straight to the center of the ballroom, the exact spot where I'd bled. She set up a small projector on a catering table. "If they want their story," she murmured, "let's give them the truth." My father was already there, a glass of bourbon in his hand, though it was barely 10 in the morning. His smile was wrong now, too sharp, too desperate. "Well," he said, voice loud enough to echo, "looks like our little actress is back for an encore." Marion ignored him. She powered the projector. The first frame appeared, the grainy overhead security footage, time-stamped. Then she hit play. The room went silent. The shove, the impact, the sickening crack, amplified and inescapable. Someone gasped. Another whispered a prayer. When the video froze on his face, twisted in fury, Marion said softly, "That is what he calls family." And the room broke open. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the projector and the faint rattle of ice in someone's untouched glass. On the screen, the frozen image of my father loomed, his hand mid-strike, his face a map of pure, unfiltered rage. Marion stepped forward, calm and clinical. "This," she said, "is what your community's most respected man did to his own daughter in front of 200 witnesses." She placed a black binder on the table with a solid thud. "And this," she continued, "is the police report confirming the charges of felony assault." My mother stood abruptly, her pearls trembling at her throat. "Stop this," she hissed, voice cracking. "Riley, you're tearing us apart. Think of Lena. Think of your father's legacy." I turned slowly to face her. The years of silence between us pressed close, suffocating, and then I simply stepped back, slipping out of her reach. From the far side of the room someone spoke. "Thomas, did you actually do that?" It was Daniel's father, his voice shaking with disbelief. All at once, the crowd shifted, 200 bodies pivoting like a tide turning. My sister began to cry again, but this time there was no applause waiting to rescue her. The masks had fallen. My father's fury flared, desperate and final. He slammed his glass down so hard the stems snapped, bourbon splashing across the white linen. "This is a disgrace," he roared. "A family moment twisted by the damned internet. She's always been difficult, always trying to make me look like the villain." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "No," I said, the words slicing through his rant like glass. "You don't need help looking like the villain, Dad. You built that reputation yourself." Marion clicked once and the screen changed. On one side appeared a photograph of 12 Maple Hollow Lane as it had been. A ruin, collapsed walls, mold blooming like bruises. On the other, a photo from last week. Golden wood floors, stained glass spilling color across the restored staircase. My work. My life. "These," Marion said, "are the facts. Ms. Vale purchased, restored, and owns this property outright. The defendant attempted to publicly misrepresent ownership to transfer it to a third party. When confronted, he committed a violent assault." The room had turned into a courtroom. Even the air seemed to wait for judgment. Across from me, Lena whispered, "You ruined my wedding." I met her eyes. "You ruined my life." And the truth hung there, gleaming, unbreakable. By the time we left the Marion Grand, the story had detonated across every screen in the city. News vans idled outside, reporters shouting questions that dissolved into static as we pushed through the doors. By noon, my father's empire had begun to crumble. Vale Enterprises, the development company that had built half of High Vale, was suddenly toxic. The city council suspended its contracts, pending ethical review. His investors demanded emergency meetings. And the bank that financed his projects froze his accounts before he could drain them. At sunset, a video aired on every local channel. My father in handcuffs, face pale, lips tight with fury. No statement. No charm. Just the image of a man caught in the gravity of his own lies. That night I sat in my kitchen, and watched the city that had once bowed to him turn away. Marion called. "They'll fight dirty," she said. "Expect smear campaigns. But they've lost the narrative, Riley. You're not the scandal. You're the evidence." Outside, the snow had stopped. The air was still, faintly blue with twilight. I touched the scar at my scalp, feeling the tight pull of healing skin. For the first time in my life, the silence around me wasn't waiting to be filled. It was mine. The trial came 6 months later in a courtroom that smelled of varnish and old dust. The light was flat, fluorescent, nothing like the chandeliers of that ballroom. I sat beside the prosecutor, my hands folded in my lap. Marion sat just behind me, still and composed, a fortress in human form. Across the aisle, my father looked smaller than I remembered. The swagger was gone, his suit hung on him like borrowed armor. My mother sat 2 rows back, her face carved into polite regret. She never once looked at me. The jury watched the footage in silence. The impact. The sound of my head meeting marble. You could hear a pin drop when the clip ended. One juror flinched so hard she dropped her pen. The doctor testified next. "The injuries are consistent with a deliberate high-force impact," he said, clinical and cold. "Not an accident." When the defense tried to paint it as a family misunderstanding, the prosecutor showed the texts. Lena's words. "Dad's going to announce it at the wedding. She'll have to say yes." It was over then. When the verdict came, it was one word, simple and final: guilty. The weight that had lived in my chest for 30 years finally cracked and fell away. 2 weeks later, the sentence was handed down. Years in prison. A lifetime restraining order. The judge's voice was calm as he read it, but to me it sounded like stone being set. Solid, unchanging, permanent. My mother sold their house soon after. She sent a letter written in her elegant looping script, filled with sorrow but no apology. I folded it once and left it in a drawer. It wasn't worth burning. Lena disappeared entirely somewhere back east. She'd become a ghost long before she left. The house on Maple Hollow Lane stood firm through it all. Its wood held the warmth of the sun, its windows shimmered with quiet defiance. On Saturdays I opened it to the public. Restoration workshops for anyone who wanted to learn to rebuild what the world had broken. The scent of sawdust and varnish replaced the silence that used to live there. One evening as dusk fell, I stood on the porch with a small brass plaque in my hands. I drilled it into the beam I had set years ago, the screws biting into solid oak. Maple Hollow 12, restored by Riley Vale. I stepped back, the porch light gleaming on the letters. The air was cool, the night still. For the first time I wasn't rebuilding. I was home.